Imagine this. You're at the airport. You're trying your hardest to get through security quickly so you can board your flight and visit your family. I don't know about you, but for me, going to the airport is already kind of stressful in and of itself. But now imagine this. You're already in this stressful situation when suddenly Donald Trump intervenes. That's a surefire way to turn your stress into full-blown panic. And what's worse, you no longer need to imagine, because this actually happened. That's right, a US military wife recently tried to fly to Hawaii to visit her husband, but then Trump intervened, and everything went downhill. How's it going, everybody? Hunter Avallone here with Occupy Democrats. Welcome back to another video. Now, we're gonna get to this US military wife in just a moment, but first, Donald Trump is destroying America's overall reputation with how his ICE is constantly doing the unthinkable. We recently covered the video of a US citizen being detained by ICE, but now new details have emerged.
Newly released details are deepening outrage over the viral video of Leonardo Garcia Venegas' arrest. Venegas, a U.S. citizen born in Florida, was tackled and cuffed by ICE agents at an Alabama construction site, despite showing his real ID. He says agents dismissed it as fake and detained him anyway. ICE now claims he was arrested not by mistake, but for obstructing their attempt to detain his undocumented brother. Venegas says he was only released after reciting his social security number. His cousin, who posted the video, says, apparently a real ID is not valid anymore, maybe because he's brown. As fear spreads among immigrant communities, some workers are refusing to return to job sites, saying they won't come back until this stuff calms down.
Yeah, is this gonna be the new thing? ICE just claiming that, oh, well, actually it was over obstruction. Also, if he was detained due to obstruction, why was he later released? But it's not just this man. Donald Trump's ICE knows absolutely no bounds. As recently, a Georgia teenager was detained by police and then later by ICE.
Have you ever been to jail?
No, sir.
Oh, you're going.
I cannot go to jail. I have my finals next weekend. My family really depends on this.
Here at her Dalton home, Jimena Arias Cristobal reunited with her family after 2 weeks of being in an ICE detention center. That's after a wrongful traffic stop led to her arrest. But she says that experience inside of Stewart and the 48 hours before she entered that detention center have changed her life entirely.
It was scary. I was terrified, and then as I was being transported down to Stewart, I stopped at some offices in Atlanta, and they had me in a room by myself for 9 hours. I didn't know what was going on. I was never explained.
Arias Cristobal's attorneys tell us that as of now, there are currently no hearings set for her in the future, and they don't believe that will happen until mid-2026.
Of course, all of this is highly concerning, but it's nothing compared to the moment you've been waiting for. That's right, a US military wife was trying to fly to Hawaii to just visit her husband, but Trump had other plans.
It was Sorokos' third visit to see her husband Matt, a U.S. Army lieutenant stationed on Oahu. The newlyweds married last December. She said she hadn't had issues before, but this time, U.S. border officials at Honolulu Airport flagged her for additional screening.
He went from completely composed to just yelling at the top of his lungs, telling my mother to go stand at the back of the line and to, excuse my language, shut up. So I automatically started crying because that was my first response.
Sorokos said they were taken to a holding room, their bags and phones were searched, and they were asked a slew of questions. Everything from her work as a former police officer to whether her tattoos were gang-related to her marriage to an American.
When I did say that I was married to somebody in the US Army, the officers laughed at me. They thought it was quite comical. I don't know whether they thought I was telling the truth or not. They kept telling me that I had too many clothes in my suitcase. So because of that, they assumed that I was going to overstay my visa.
Sorokos was subject to more screening. Her fingerprints and a DNA swab of her mouth were taken, while her mother was free to go. Her heart sunk when officials told her she would be declined entry to the U.S. and deported back to Australia the next day.
And he said, so basically what is going to happen is we're going to send you to a prison overnight where you will stay.
Use the word prison?
Prison. Yes.
Not detention center, but a
Not
prison.
detention center. He said prison. And I automatically I started crying again. Because when you think prison, you think big time criminals. Like, I don't know who I'm being housed with.
Sirocco said officials conducted a body cavity search, walked her through the airport in handcuffs, and drove her to the federal detention center.
They stated, no, you're not under arrest. You haven't done anything wrong and you will be facing no criminal charges. So I was very confused as to why this was all happening.
At the prison, Sirocco's was strip searched and detained with women who had been convicted of murder and drug offenses. Because she had missed the cutoff for dinner, she was not given food. At no point was she allowed to call her husband or mother.
And I found that so absurd, because if I'm going to be there overnight, my right, just as a human being, should be to contact at least one person.
After a sleepless night, she was brought back to the airport the next morning, where her mother joined her. Only then was she offered a phone call with her husband.
I think we were both just very emotional. We hadn't spoken to each other in 24 hours. He didn't know where I was or whether I was safe. It's not only myself, it's my mother and my husband that also had to endure that pain. You know, my husband being a current serving member, to serve his country and to be treated in that way, I find very disgusting.
Sirocco's husband is now in Sydney with his wife. She says she wants people to know the risks of traveling to the U.S. now.
It's made it physically impossible for me to even ever enter the United States ever again.
What does that mean for your marriage?
At the time, I felt like my world came crashing down. I felt like my marriage was over when they told me that.
Here you have someone who is married to a US citizen, who's serving in the military, being mocked, strip searched, all for what? Yeah, you heard it from the video, all because she had too many clothes, so they assumed she must be overstaying her visa. I'm sorry, what? Is this a Disney movie? This entire ordeal is not only traumatic for this poor woman that had to go through this, but it's embarrassing for the entire country. All of this is so unbelievable. America, let's do better.